your initial reactions to this summit?
Yes, well, indeed, the optics of it was very interesting. But I think one of the main outcomes is that there is no outcome out of the summit. There is no breakthrough when it comes to ceasefire, which I think was much expected, to be honest. But at the same time, I think it was quite embarrassing that even Trump could not really justify and could not really say much about what was discussed and if there was any success at all. He said it was a successful summit, but we don't really see this in terms of the actual reflection of what sort of agreement has been reached between these two leaders. I think the most interesting part would be once we hear the reactions from the European leaders and President Zelensky, we will know that whether there was at least some sort of framework discussed on how to achieve the ceasefire. But the minimum, the targets that Trump has set was that there would be some sort of agreement when it comes to ceasefire. But I don't really feel like this has been the case, judging from the press conference that we heard. And also, it was quite telling that the leaders were unable or unwilling to answer any questions from the journalists, because I don't really think that there was much to discuss there.
As you said, we're still waiting to hear from Vladimir Zelensky. Trump said in that interview with Fox News after the summit that the ball is basically now in Zelensky's court. He's the one who's going to have to make a deal happen. Does this summit sort of change the balance of power, putting the pressure now on Zelensky rather than on Putin?
Well, I have to say that this summit could have been a bigger disaster, let's put it that way. The fact itself that there was nothing agreed so far, and there is no sort of discussion about some sort of exact concessions that Ukraine has to make, is already some sort of achievement, even though the bar was very low and expectations were very low. I think it could have been worse. I think the worst case scenario for Ukraine would have been if there was some sort of agreement about territorial concessions, and then Trump would take this proposal to President Zelensky, and it would be leave it or take it sort of a proposal. So Zelensky wouldn't have really much options there. It would be either territorial concessions or losing the support from the United States. So far, we don't see this happening, but I think ultimately, of course, it is up to President Zelensky to make a decision for his own nation. But I don't think that Trump was should be happy out of this summit, because I think Putin is more of a winner out of this, because he managed to get out of the international isolation. The optics were in favor of Putin from this summit, and at the same time, there is a feeling that Putin really did not propose any kind of serious concessions. Of course, interesting part is that he mentioned security guarantees, which makes me think that Trump has pressed about this particular issue. But we have the examples of Budapest Memorandum, for example, and I don't really think that Putin would be serious at all in terms of discussing even providing any security guarantees for Ukraine, because his main aim is to violate Ukraine's sovereignty and to keep Ukraine weak and unable to sustain itself and defend itself.
Let's come back to James Andre in the studio. James, where does this summit leave Ukraine in terms of its negotiating power?
Well, I feel that it's putting Ukraine in a tight spot. It really depends what Donald Trump will have told these European leaders, because he's spoken to them on the phone. We know that now on his way back to Washington. He's spoken to Zelensky at length. He's spoken for an hour with Ursula von der Leyen and other European leaders, including Emmanuel Macron, the French president, also Keir Starmer, and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. So, for now, we still have no reaction from any of these leaders, which, it is quite surprising to think that we have this very important summit, and for now, nothing is coming out. There are really two options. Either nothing much has come out of it, or else something pretty big has, and everybody's thinking about what they're going to say. The problem is, it could very well be that Vladimir Putin has managed to convince Donald Trump that he was arriving with an acceptable proposal, and that indeed, he's like to end the war. Who wouldn't? But on his own terms, and that, the risk is, as was just said, that he might try and impose this on the Europeans and the Ukrainians, in which case we would be in this kind of worst-case scenario where, for Ukraine, where Vladimir Putin walks off both rehabilitated on the international stage, having been received by the president with all the pomp we've just seen, goes back to the Europeans, tries to pressure a Russian brokered solution upon Zelensky, and then the Europeans refuse. That drives a wedge between the United States and its NATO allies, and that would just be the perfect scenario for Vladimir Putin, because that, of course, would weaken the alliance, and that would be, obviously a very big problem for the Europeans and for Volodymyr Zelensky. And then potentially Donald Trump could decide to just walk out on the whole negotiation. We'll have to see how that goes. The other thing is, there was one information that had been given by Donald Trump in that interview with Sean Hannity, which was that he was hoping for a trilateral meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president, Vladimir Putin, and himself in the weeks to come. Well, basically, that has been flatly denied by the Kremlin, with one of the main players in that room saying that there was no discussion of a potential trilateral meeting. That means really that's the last thing that might have happened, was kind of been taken off the table. So no ceasefire, no concrete steps towards one, and it appears no meeting. So that's not a great outcome when it comes to Trump.
We've got an alert that European leaders are holding a new call about Ukraine in the wake of this summit. So perhaps, as you said, James, they're sort of weighing having a unified response. We'll perhaps be hearing from them shortly. Natia Seskuria, of course, we don't know what Trump and Putin agreed to, but just how much do you think that Ukraine might be willing to accept and to compromise with Russia in order to achieve a ceasefire?
Well, the problem is that when it comes to Trump mentions that there could be some sort of agreement. Well, he would be looking for some sort of options involving land swap. So this is extremely problematic for Ukraine, obviously for obvious reasons, because Russia has put forward its maximalist demands when it comes to territorial concessions from Ukraine's side. So President Zelensky has been quite clear on this particular issue. But when it comes to ceasefire, Ukraine was, even initially, Ukraine agreed in principle. But Russia remains the main problem, because I don't really believe that Russians want a ceasefire right now, because Putin still believes that he has an upper hand when it comes to battlefield. And to a certain extent, if we look at the ongoing developments, even though Russian advance is slow, they are still making some progress. So I think Putin does not really need to make this decision right now. And what he wanted, in my opinion, was to maybe offer some sort of flattery to Donald Trump, which he did yesterday, and also gain some time in exchange in order to potentially have more leverage in these discussions, follow-up discussions in the near future. And in that sense, I think it looks like there will be some sort of series of discussions, which was hinted at during this press conference.
And just briefly, James, perhaps to wrap us up, what do you foresee happening in the coming days? What are the next steps going to be?
Well, we'll see what comes out of, we are going to start knowing what is indeed being put on the table by the Russians, and it very much depends on that. One other thing that was said by Donald Trump, because all we have to work with here is this interview with Sean Hannity, is at some stage, this Fox News presenter asks Donald Trump, he says, you've been sanctioning India, the next step would be China, so that's secondary sanctions for buying oil from Russia. This is the real significant. These are the real significant sanctions that could be slapped onto Russia. Those are the ones that really hurt. Now, India is an important move, of course. Russia is the next chunk, and it's a big one. But Donald Trump asked if he would consider that. Said, "Look, we've had a great meeting. I don't feel we need to move towards sanctions right now. We'll see in 2 or 3 weeks." So, the big question mark is, will there be another meeting? The Kremlin seems to say no. Will the Americans step up when it comes to sanctions? Does Donald Trump want to really sanction Russians if they don't play ball? The answer to that seems to be no as well. Big question mark now is, what did he offer, or what did he put on the table for the Europeans and for, mainly Ukraine, and how they will react?
All right, we'll continue to follow those reactions, of course, throughout the day. James, thank you so much. That's James Andre, our reporter here on set with me, and Natia Seskuria. I also want to thank you so much for your insight. She is an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute.